from?
Martin Gottesfeld.
An inmate at the Plymouth County Jail. To accept this call, press 0. To refuse it, your current balance is $75.14. This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. Thank you for using Global Telling.
Hi, babe.
Hi, babe.
And hello to everyone else. My name is Marty Gottesfeld.
I'm Dana Gottesfeld.
You can read a little bit about our story at Rolling Stone in an article called The Hacker Who Cared Too Much. You can also read Michelle Malkin's article, The Brutal Battle Against Medical Kidnappers. My name is Marty Gottesfeld again. I'm a human rights activist. I focus on the rights of institutionalized children. So that's kids in juvenile detention centers, residential treatment centers, orphanages, psych wards, facilities like that, anywhere where you have children who do not have the protection of their parents. In February 2016, I was arrested after a boat that Dana and I were on was rescued about 50 miles off of Key West. And we were rescued by the Disney Wonder cruise ship. And the article, or the story, made fairly big news. It splashed pretty much wall to wall across every media outlet on earth, I think. It's not kind of close to that there. Rolling Stone tells part of the story, but they really weren't able to tell all of it, and you know, it really wasn't their fault because we at that point were not ready to tell the story ourselves, Dana and I.
Yeah.
And we're telling the story now. I do want to say the rest of the Rolling Stone article, they got things mostly right, and the humanity of the story is definitely where it needs to be. The one other small exception to that we'll get into later. So you might ask yourselves, what were we doing 50 miles out to sea on a small boat, and why was I arrested after we were rescued? And the answer is that we had spent the 4 weeks prior to that, roughly, in Cuba as asylum seekers. I was seeking political asylum from the Obama administration because the Obama administration was persecuting me for my work on behalf of institutionalized children, and specifically for coming to the rescue of a young girl named Justina Pelletier. And a lot of you may remember Justina's story, even if you don't remember her by name. She was the child whose parents brought her to Boston Children's Hospital in February of 2013, seeking to see one of her specialists who had already been treating her for a condition called mitochondrial disease. But instead of seeing that specialist, a different group of comparatively junior doctors got it stuck in their minds that Justina was basically making up all of her symptoms and that she really had a psychological condition called somatoform disorder. And so these new doctors at Boston Children's Hospital wanted to take Justina off of her pain medications, her heart medications, her brain medications, all the medications she was on for mitochondrial disease. And her parents said no, because they were worried their daughter would die. And the hospital said, well, if you don't let us take her off these meds, we're going to go to court and take custody of your daughter using the state. And they did. And they put misleading statements on an affidavit. And the Boston Globe has since covered that, and I've covered that at freemartyg.com. You can see my report, human rights report regarding what happened to Justina. It cites over 70 sources, ranging from PBS to ABC News to Fox News to Liberty Counsel to the Boston Globe, Fox Connecticut, and cites interviews with Justina herself, who is now since spoken out about this stuff and spoken out about what happened to her. And the bottom line is Boston Children's Hospital took Justina off all of her meds and locked her in a psych ward. They left her in agony. It's hard to it's hard to really understand the horror that she was put through. It's certainly one of the worst cases that I've encountered in my career as a human rights activist helping these kids. Dana, you've seen a lot. You've talked to a lot of survivors of pretty horrible abuse. I mean, I'm sure that we've kind of seen worse, but I don't think we've seen worse over such a prolonged period. What do you think?
Well, we've definitely seen similar cases. Unfortunately, it's not that uncommon to see children forced into situations that are labeled as treatment but are not backed in, science and evidence and free choice and free will, which is especially dangerous to somebody who's already, doesn't have all of their rights. So to be locked in a psych ward against their will and treated for something they don't have, with their parents fighting for them to get out, is I don't know, it's the stuff that we see movies made of. Have we seen worse than Justina? I mean, I'm sure probably, but not to such a young child, not at such a prominent hospital with such a good reputation.
Yeah, I think that's probably also true. I mean, to me, probably what stood out, though, I think, was also the extended period of time. You're talking about 16 months.
Yeah.
This entire time, Justina really does have a rare, degenerative, progressive, and potentially fatal disease. And the lack of these therapies for so long, has left her in a wheelchair, has left her, physically, I mean, I guess disfigured is the right word to use for it. I mean, it's just unconscionable what happened to this girl. And as you can read in Rolling Stone, I was not going to let this girl die. And I was not going to let this girl be tortured like this. We had seen so many cases already at that point.
I think people might want to know, did you know Justina, or what attracted you to this story specifically?
No, I did not know Justina. I had never talked to her or her parents. But the case was incredibly well documented. It came to our attention through our normal channels for learning about cases like these on social media. And it took a while to actually vet the case because a world-renowned hospital was involved, and a world-renowned hospital was arguing the diagnosis, which is different than we see in, the troubled teen industry, which is the kind of collective umbrella under which most of these abusive facilities sit. But, in the end, there were several things that were really bad warning signs. And this kind of thing, which gets called a medical kidnapping, this happens a lot. This is not a rare thing. There are thousands of families in America that have been through this. You might not have heard of it before, but you can go to medicalkidnap.com. They publish just story after story after story about this kind of thing. And when it happened, right, Justina and her family were not allowed to seek a second opinion, which was one thing that just stunk to high heaven for me. Because from a scientific perspective, to try to cut out differing opinions, there is no valid scientific basis for that. None. When her family started trying to speak out to the press, Boston Children's apparently sought a gag order, and a juvenile court judge told them they could not speak to the press. And so between not being allowed to seek a second opinion, not being allowed to talk about what was happening, again, just the stink coming off of this thing was getting worse and worse and worse. And then seeing the previous cases where this had happened at the same hospital in a very similar situations, that also underscored the imperative. And then reading up about mitochondrial disease and, what could happen. And then, a former nurse who had worked in that psych ward spoke out, a former federal prosecutor who was on the board of the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. He spoke out. And so over time, the snowball just kind of got so big, the number of sources talking about it. Pictures of Justina started to leak out, where you could visually see what was happening to her. Notes that she would sneak out from the psych ward. One of those got published. And, it had a child's handwriting saying they hurt me all the time. They don't let me sleep very much. Hurry. And so, over time, it just, the cacophony, something really, really bad was happening here. And the former nurse called it torture. The nurse who had worked in that psych ward, who read Justina's records, called it torture.
And just brief. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, torture, freedom from torture is a non-derogable human right. There's only a few of those where countries are not allowed to deviate whatsoever. Okay? Slavery, ex post facto law, and torture are completely off limits. They are never allowable in any circumstance, ever. Okay? Even the right to life has exceptions. If the police have to kill a hostage taker to safely free his hostages, that's not considered a human rights violation. That's considered, appropriate law enforcement if there's no other way to resolve the situation. The right to life is not a non-derogable human right. But the right to be free from torture is. And part of the reason there's an implied helplessness when you're talking about a victim of torture. This is someone who posed no threat, right? They posed no threat. They could not harm anybody. They were not harming anybody. They were, powerless. And that's that's kind of the difference between like the freedom from torture and the right to life, right? The person being tortured is not a threat to anybody. There's no reason. There's no justification for treating a child like this. There can be none. And every once in a while, someone will try to come up to me and try to justify what was done to this girl in some way. And I just look at them like they've got 8 heads. Because I don't think you need the most powerful moral compass to know that this was wrong. So anyway, I defended this girl's life. And then instead of going after the people who did this to Justina, the Obama administration went after me. And now remember, Boston Children's Hospital is the primary pediatric teaching facility for Harvard Medical School. Obama graduated from Harvard Law School. Harvard was trying to get him to be its new president just not that long ago, and ended up taking a senior official from his administration. Justina's parents went to the FBI. They went to all the local law enforcement agencies they could think of to try to get something done for their daughter. No one would help them. And I had previously gone to the FBI over other cases in the troubled teen industry, and they wouldn't even take my call. Dana and I went there in person. They wouldn't even talk to us. But, oh, my God, something happened to Harvard, and drop everything, fly across town, and prosecute the human rights activist who was standing up for the girl in the wheelchair. Now, these Obama prosecutors have a very bad record with activists. The activist before me, who they went after like this, his name was Aaron Swartz. He killed himself. He was facing 35 years in jail from the same judge that is now presiding over my case. And this judge has financial ties to Justina's torturers, and he hasn't recused himself. And the judge who signed off on the search warrant for my home is a separate judge. Her husband works at Harvard Medical School and another Harvard-affiliated hospital. The search warrant application she signed off on referred to her husband's workplace and to her own former workplace because she used to work at Harvard Medical School. And she didn't recuse from my case. So after the search, but before this latest judge was assigned, it became fairly clear to me that I was a legitimate candidate for political asylum. You had a serious violation of human rights of the Convention Against Torture, which is a treaty the U.S. ratified in good faith, is bound by under Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, which says that all such treaties, once they become duly ratified by the Senate, are the supreme law of the land. So you had this very significant violation of this international treaty. You had political allies of the administration protecting other political allies of the administration instead of enforcing the Convention Against Torture. And you had prosecutors and judges whom are known to cause the death of activists. Now, at that point, stupidly, I did not have a passport. I had never gotten one. I was a proud American. I never intended to leave America. I didn't like the idea of submitting myself to the justice system in a foreign jurisdiction, quite frankly. And that was really foolish on my part. I should have had a passport. Because without a passport, once the FBI came and knocked on my door, I wasn't really able to go anywhere. I could only potentially reach Canada, Mexico, or anywhere available by sea. Now, other people have tried to get political asylum in Canada and Mexico. They're usually turned down, as a matter of course. There are other countries that perhaps I would have liked to have tried, but which I could not physically reach.
Right.
And so I set about planning to get to Cuba. Not because I'm particularly a fan of the administration there, not because I'm a communist, which I'm not. Proud American, again, my whole life. And so I set about planning to get to Cuba. And ultimately, my wife decided that I wasn't going anywhere without her. And I, didn't necessarily want her to come. I knew it would be difficult and dangerous, but I wasn't going to say no either. It was her choice.
Yeah, it would have been too hard to not know if you were alive or not.
Yeah. So, found a guy selling boats in Key West, which is about 90 or 100 miles away from Cuba. Rolling Stone says Miami, but again, Rolling Stone didn't have the benefit of talking to us to actually ferret out this part of the story. We weren't looking to tell this part of the story at that point in time. We packed our stuff in our car. We drove to Key West. This was over a 30-hour drive. I bought the boat, used boat the next day from somebody. We set out sometime around dinner time. I had the coordinates for 2 international marinas in Cuba. We set out for one of the closer ones. The ocean was really rough that night. The ocean was so rough that the bow of the boat kept pitching back and forth faster than the GPS could update our heading. And so for a while I struggled to even try to keep us on course. And after what felt like forever, but might have been 10, 15 minutes, I found a star in the sky that was at roughly the right heading. And if I kept the bow of the boat on that star, we would continue to make way on an appropriate course. And the GPS could take its time updating or whatever. It didn't matter. And so, I drove the boat throughout the night. It was very important to me that Dana not drive, not even put gas in the car, not purchase food. She had to be a passive passenger. And I can get into the reasons for that if anyone's curious in another recording. But I just want to say for the record, Dana did nothing to actually get us to Cuba. She didn't help buy the boat. She didn't help buy food. She didn't help put gas in the car. She didn't drive. She didn't, set the coordinates in the GPS. She didn't do any of that. And that was very much intentional on my part. So we arrived in Cuba at about 2 a.m. that night. We had radioed at the border, the barrier of international waters, or I had, to let them know, as per international custom, that, a craft was entering their territorial waters. We didn't get a response. Continued, got to the marina around 2 a.m. I guess the transmission had been heard, though, because there were guys in green Cuban military fatigues there to meet the boat. I had no boating experience whatsoever. However, I was a certified lifeguard, and Dana was a competitive swimmer. So we were confident in the water, but not so much behind the wheel of the boat. So just docking the vessel on the other side was a serious challenge. And me and one of them just grabbed the bow rope and just kind of pulled it in. They started speaking to us in Spanish. I hadn't spoken Spanish since high school, so I'm struggling.
You were doing all right. You were doing all right.
I didn't feel like I was doing that well. And eventually they started asking us for passports in Spanish, and Dana had a passport from her seminary time in Israel. I did not have a passport, so they asked me for my passport. I told them in Spanish, I don't have. They told us to sleep on the boat. We tried. I don't know if we really got much sleep that night. Early the next morning, someone greeted us in English, saying hello. That was music to my ears. They said, there's a doctor here to check you out. The night before, they're kind of asking us why we were here. I didn't know how to say it in Spanish. I'm saying asylum, political asylum. They didn't really know. But then the next day, the doctor comes on. He speaks English. At that point, I think I reiterate political asylum. The doctor examines us briefly, just trying to make sure we don't have anything contagious, anything like that. Shortly thereafter, they take Dana off the boat. They take me off the boat. We bring our stuff off the boat. They bring a couple of dogs through to smell the boat. I'm not exactly sure what they were looking for. In any case, they didn't find it. They bring us up into the marina. They catalog all our stuff. Later that night, we're brought to a house near the beach. We're given a bedroom on the second floor. At first, the stuff is with us for a few minutes. Our stuff is with us for a few minutes. Then they take all my computers and my phone and all those devices away. But we're our clothes. Again, we're told to sleep. And we try. We're woken up in the morning. They give us breakfast. We're interviewed on camera with Cuban officials, some of whom are in uniform and armed. Some of them weren't. There was a translator there. They pick up on the fact that I can understand some of the Spanish they're saying, and so they're asking us, why do we have a translator? Why, can you just speak to us directly? And I'm like, well, no, I'd rather not, because the consequences for getting details wrong here could be, big, so I'd rather speak through a translator. They asked me, who I was. They'd done some of this in the marina, too, the earlier in the day, asking who I was, why I was there. I explained to them human rights activist, troubled teen industry. I explained to them the government over here in America claims I'm a member of Anonymous. When the first round of guys, who I think were Cuban intelligence at the dock, heard that the government here was claiming I was a member of Anonymous, one of them looks at me and he goes, "Much respect." Babe, when they interviewed you that following day, what did they ask? What did they want to know?
I don't remember the specifics. I remember the girl who was watching me tried to fix my shirt and my hair, and I was just I don't care. I think she asked me
for the camera.
Yeah, because they recorded these interviews. I think they asked me about. They took my computer. I think they asked me about what was on it. If there was anything related to the troubled teen industry or anything that I thought was relevant or interesting. It was brief. I didn't really. I don't know. They weren't that interested in me, to be honest.
Okay.
They asked me. They asked me for if I had any passwords or stuff like that as well.
Okay. No, they also asked for my passwords and things. They wanted to check everything out.
Yeah.
And over the next 4 weeks, we were moved a couple of times. Once in like the same like resort area to kind of a more remote, not like just further from the beach, further away from tourists, kind of house with like a higher fence around it.
Yep.
And then we were ultimately moved to another place, further away from that. After a couple of weeks, we were fed well. They had doctors come and check out the blood for blood tests. I asked about like inoculations, where we missed any of our shots, and they said no, as long as you have got all the shots in the United States, you should be good. I wrote a very long statement about why I was there in English, and kind of went over all of the human rights violations in the troubled teen industry, what happened to Justina, and how I had fought to save her life, and why the government was coming after me. Dana wrote a statement as well. It took us a long time to write those statements out by hand and kind of get all the details. Trying to think like what else happened. I mean, we were able to watch TV. A couple of occasions we were able to go for walks.
Yeah. They had about so we went to 3 locations, and they had different shifts of guards. So there was like 2 sets of shifts, and they'd each stay for about like 5 days. They would stay full time with us, and then the next set would come. And then they would stay like 5 or 7 days, and then the first set would come back. And so we became familiar with these people. During the day, it was a lot of just reading books. And at the 3rd location, they had a TV. It was Cuban TV. I think there was like 1 channel that had some English shows, but some of it was just music.
The 2nd location had a TV as well.
Right. No, you're right.
As I recall.
Yeah, it did.
The 2nd location had a TV as well.
Yeah.
I think even the 1st location had a TV. It just didn't work that well.
Yeah.
I think we had trouble with the antenna or whatever
Yeah.
it was.
But anyway, so there was like 5 that would sleep with us. And then like during
not in the same room.
Not in the same room.
We had our own private bedroom.
Yeah.
The whole time.
But during the day, there was like all kinds of people.
Yeah, and then they weren't. Well, for the most part, they weren't wearing uniforms. They were in plain clothes. And that first full day in Cuba, they had the one guard who had his sidearm on him, and I was kind of eyeing it like, what's going on here? I think it was kind of obvious that I was a little freaked out by this guy in Cuban military fatigues with a sidearm. And so after that, they didn't. We never saw them with weapons. I think they understood that that made us very uncomfortable.
Yeah, he was a fixture. He was a fixture. He was there almost most of the time. So we got to know the people watching us a little, not like personally, but like spend time like with them. Remember, I have a lot of very sharp memories. So what they would do is they would bring food like in buckets, not buckets. I don't know how to.
Yeah, that makes it sound a lot. In containers.
Containers.
Plastic containers.
Right. So they would bring us food for everybody in containers, and then they would feed us with the different meals. The food is pretty good, I think. But anyways, I guess we should get to the end. They were considering Marty's statement after he had finally finished writing it, and they woke us up pretty early, and
you have 1 minute remaining.
They asked us to come downstairs. They sat us down, and they videoed us, and they said, "Your application has been denied, and you guys have to leave. So have your bags together, and we're taking you back to the marina."
They had all their computers there. They had been, and they were like clear plastic bags. They had been inventoried or whatever, and they said, we're giving you back all your stuff.
Yeah.
We're putting you back on your boat.
They had they had a doctor there while they gave us the news. Like, I think they had one of those heart rate monitors, cufflinks on my arm. Like, they were making sure that we were okay, I guess, emotionally, and not like having heart
I
attacks.
don't remember a heart rate monitor.
There was some kind of doctor. There was some kind of medical thing going on. I think. Yeah, but anyways, they drove us to the marina.
Thank you for using Global Link.
Please continue.
So they drove us to the marina. They gave us back our stuff, our computers. We told them that there wasn't enough gas on the boat. We weren't going to have enough. And they said, okay, you can. The boat is fine. You tell me, did they say that they've been like starting the motor so that it didn't go bad? Did they?
Yeah. They said that they had taken good care of the boat. That they've been starting it every day. I made sure they tested the radio before we left, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
They suggested we make for the Bahamas if we didn't want to go back to America. They provided us with a wind chart.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
We packed all the stuff on the boat. Go ahead.
Yeah, they wouldn't give us like food really or water to take, so we had to buy it at the marina, little stand. So we bought some food and water to take with us. Then there was like so many people standing on the dock, and then so we went out on the boat, and then
they wouldn't give us an extra fuel tank either, like an extra tank to carry like more fuel, so we could make it somewhere other than back to America. Basically, we had enough fuel to make it there. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So they basically, in international terms, they reasyled us, is the term for it, under international humanitarian law. When you have an asylum seeker who comes somewhere, you're not supposed to return him back to like where he might be persecuted. We asked to speak to a consulate for another country where we also wanted to seek asylum. We were told no.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going, babe.
So then we started off on the boat, and then they had their version of the Coast Guard follow us for about 10 miles.
Well, they said they did, but I never saw them.
I saw it.
Okay, I never saw them, but okay.
Yeah. So they followed us out for a while. And they turned around, and then the waves were really, really bad. They were so high. I couldn't look forward.
Yeah, and they told us that the seas are going to be calm then. That was the thing. They said you got good weather, calm seas, and like the seas have been rough on the way in too. Like, and I think actually that like the seas on the way in had really beat up the boat, and so the boat probably wasn't in good condition starting off this return leg of the trip. And yeah, the rough seas on the day that we were told to leave clearly didn't help.
The waves.
Continue there.
The waves were just so high that I just couldn't look forward. It was too scary. I could only look to the side, so that at least the wave would be crashing by the time it caught my eye line. It was really, really rough. Also, it was so rough that we lost the hatch in the front of the boat that keeps water out of the covered part of the boat.
Right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so all of our stuff was getting wet. The boat was really taking a beating.
Yeah, and on TV, on the Cuban TV, before we left, right? Of course, during that period, I guess the head of the Russian Orthodox Church came for a state visit. But the day that we're asked to leave is the day before Obama was scheduled to be in Cuba for some diplomatic function. I'm not entirely sure if that had anything to do with them, deporting us the day before or not. the timing did seem, it seemed significant.
Yeah.
It was actually our wedding anniversary that day, or at least our second wedding anniversary. We legally got married December 26th, 2014, at a town hall in Manchester, New Hampshire, because we were worried that the FBI might crash the wedding. And then we had another ceremony in Florida with all of our family February of 2015. And so this day that we were deported, I think it was February 17th, 2016 or whatever, it was our wedding anniversary. And the days before that, I'd actually asked without Dana knowing, I'd actually asked the Cubans, like, I told them, hey, my wedding anniversary is coming up. I'd like to do something for Dana. Obviously, I know our situation is not very conducive to planning, an anniversary, but do you think we could do something? And they're like, yeah, we'll try to help you take care of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to surprise Dana, please don't tell her. Right. And so my understanding was actually that, we were going to be having some kind of a, limited, given the circumstances, kind of celebration, and instead we were, put back into a doomed boat and told to leave.
Yeah, according to my memory, which I might have got the dates wrong, but we spent our anniversary on the Disney ship.
Okay, was that then or around then? Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, they're so close together. Yeah. And then so the boat stopped working. The engine died.
Well, the engine kept spinning. It was just there was no drive to move the boat. Like the engine was actually still spinning. It was still idling. I thought about jumping in the water and trying to check out, the vessel to see what was going on. But the thing is that the waves were really high, and even with the tether, I worried about getting swept away. And I have a lot of respect for what the water can do. So ultimately decided not to do that, and issued a Mayday. Got on the VHF radio and issued a Mayday. And the first Mayday actually was not answered. I guess no one was in range. VHF has a limited range. You're only getting a dozen or so miles out, especially with a not very powerful VHF that we had in that vessel. And so I tried again, like a half hour later, and the Disney Wonder cruise ship, of all people, picked up.
No, so it was like it was starting to become dusk, so it was getting darker. And actually, no, the first person that picked up was a fishing boat. We got 2 answers to our Mayday. And
I thought the Disney Wonder was first, and the fishing vessel offered assistance, and the Disney Wonder relayed to the Coast Guard, and then basically said, all right, never mind, we got it. We'll go take care of it. And eventually tucked us out of the water.
Yeah, it's possible. I thought that the fishing vessel was first, but I guess it doesn't really matter.
So, yeah, there was a vessel as well that answered. It was a commercial vessel of some kind. I'm not even sure if it was a fishing vessel, but there was also a commercial vessel. We ended up shooting up a couple of signal flares at the request of the bridge on the Disney boat so they could, find us, relayed our GPS coordinates to them. By the time they pulled up alongside us, it was basically dark out.
Yeah.
I think it might have been raining as well. I asked if they could put an engineer on the boat to take a look at our motor and transmission and figure out why, no power is going to the prop, and they basically said, no, they don't do that. They would, rescue us if we wanted. Given the choices, we, said yes. There's a doctor on the Disney boat, checked us out as soon as we got on board. And, I could swear when they asked us, what day we left, I truthfully told them, the date in January. It was Martin Luther King Day, whatever day it was. It was Monday, that Monday in January in 2016. I could swear I told them that. The Disney crew later relayed that we had told them February, which was just a couple of days earlier, before the rescue. And that might have been why Rolling Stone got the timeline wrong. They were queuing off of what the Disney crew had said that we had said. But the way to know that the actual timeline is in the missing persons reports and the police reports, and the timeline back up in Massachusetts in terms of when we went missing, because we didn't go missing in February, we went missing in January. And, if someone were to track down the guy we bought the boat from, he's going to tell you, or that I bought the boat from, he's going to tell you I bought the boat, that Monday in January. It's not that big a boat. It wouldn't. It's a 23-foot power boat. Like, you're not going to survive on there. You're not going to bring a month's worth of supplies on there. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's, for the most part, that's the whole story. I mean, at least of the Cuba part and the rescue part. Other parts of the story have been told by other outlets. This was kind of like the missing piece of the puzzle. And I think the relevant things here, right, are why we were on the boat in the first place. Justina, the little girl, she's done interviews now. She's talked about what happened to her. This was torture. There's no convincing me, or I think anyone who hears Justina tell it and sees hears her voice and sees her describe it is going to know that. And instead of living up to its obligations under international treaties to do something about that torture, the Obama DOJ went after the person who defended the little girl and chased him to the ends of the earth. I think it's also important that, Dana and I could have perished. Like, it's not, we're lucky to be here. And, there would have been other ways for the Cuban government to go about this whole thing. They could have let us talk to other embassies. They could have put us on a flight home. They could have done a lot. Instead, they kind of did what they did.
Yeah, it was the first time in my life I ever really contemplated that I was going to die.
I'm sorry, baby.
No, I mean it was just interesting.
No, it was more than interesting. It was very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The only other thing that I think, while we're talking about Rolling Stone, they did a good job with this article. The humanity of the article is there. The boat part, they got incorrect because we weren't willing to tell that part of the story yet. And again, there was this bad date, I think, related to the Disney crew, which kind of threw the timeline of the Rolling Stone story off because that was all they had to go on. And the only other part of the Rolling Stone story that I take kind of an exception to from a factual basis is Justina's Right Now video, which is when Justina actually gets, a video of Justina in her wheelchair asking to go home, asking the former governor of Massachusetts, Paul Patrick, who's actually a close associate with Barack Obama. Barack Obama, we've heard, or it's in the news, trying to encourage Deval Patrick to run for president. Anyway, Justina is begging Deval Patrick and begging a court judge who put the gag order on her family and who, everything else, to please just let her go home. And she's in this wheelchair. She looks terrified. She is terrified. Weeks before she goes to Boston Children's Hospital, she's figure skating, and you can just see kind of what's happened to her in this video. Rolling Stone makes reference to this video, but there's a part missing in terms of how that video was able to come into existence. In the Rolling Stone article, it's easy to come to the misunderstanding that that video could have been recorded at any time. And the reality is that it could not, because the visitation restrictions on Justina and her family, the monitoring of their communication, the armed guards who chaperone, that video came to exist after Justina left Wayside and after the visiting restrictions were relaxed and her family were able to take her on day trips, with unchaperoned day trips. And it was at that point that video was able to be recorded and that video was uploaded. It was shortly after that Justina went home. And I don't think, I could be wrong here, But I don't think that that video could have come into existence without the actions that I and perhaps also some actions that some other people took to make that change in Justina's circumstance, that initial change in Justina's circumstance possible. I do agree with Rolling Stone, though, that it was that video, that Right Now video, that was the final nail in the coffin in terms of BCH's, Boston Children's Hospital's diagnosis. That was the final thing that really just shattered any remaining doubt that Justina really had the physical condition, mitochondrial disease, and not the psychological condition that Boston Children's Hospital had claimed for 16 months that she had, or 15 months, or 16 months at that point. Is there anything else that you could think of, Dana?
No, I think those are the highlights.